Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cassandra Finch. I am the owner and creator of the Phoenix Mystery School Center for Transformational Healing, Intuitive Development, and Soul Level Healing. I'm really excited to be here with you today to read the chapter of my book, to go a little bit deeper into certain parts, to explain certain things. But I also am going to give a trigger warning because this does go into some abuse. And just for context, it is about like a decade-year span of being stalked and harassed and bullied and things like that. So I do just want to put that out there. If you do have any sensitivities to this sort of topic, then it's there just so you're aware. Okay, so my chapter is called Awaken the Power and Light Within. And yay, if you have your paperback, great. Otherwise, you can grab your Kindle edition, follow along, or you can just listen. And if you do have any sort of questions, please put them in the comments. I would love for you to share any revelations or anything that came through for you so that we can talk about that. Or if you need any sort of support after this reading, I am more than happy to provide that. So I'm going to get started. So one of my biggest lessons in learning how to trust myself and activate my own power source came from a very traumatic and dangerous situation. So picture this. I was 14 years old, dealing with a tidal wave of grief and heartache, dealing with insecurities of abandonment and rejection from certain family members, and those that I thought who would love me, but who were my biggest rumor creators. I often felt that love was given only to be yanked away by inauthentic actions and left me questioning my value. During this time, I also lost a very important family member, one I felt truly loved and seen by. I had also met my first boyfriend by this time. We started school together in grade 7. We were 12 when we met, and at 14, 15 was when we kind of started dating, even though I wasn't allowed to at the time, but I did anyway because I'm a 14-year-old manifestor who did what she wanted. But we were dating, we were in middle school, but we were in the middle of the breakup phase. And at this age, attention from other girls can be more enticing to young men because emotional maturity and connection at this point have not quite made their mark. I had already been through so much in my life at this point. I believed I was alone, although I was surrounded by many. I was independent, I was self-reliant, which many saw as a strength, and falsely applauded me for, which reinforced this belief system for me. It was actually a coping mechanism to not feel let down, disappointed, and abandoned. In short, it was a way to protect my heart. The applause unfortunately reaffirmed that belief I was stronger by myself, that I could control the outcomes, and that I would never feel the emotional pain of discard and emotional and rejection. For most of my life, I actually felt out of place, like a broken clock gathering dust on the wall. I felt unseen, I felt unheard. For many years, I struggled with creating friendships and feelings of belonging. And at this time, especially in school, there were so many little cliques and people that just gravitated to one another. And I seemed to fit in many different groups, but it just seemed like I was always on the outside, always the replacement. I spent so much time alone, especially in elementary school, either because one of my very few friends were not around, or they decided to play with someone else and exclude me. So I would hide in the library or in a secluded place outside where no one could see me and watch everyone else play happily together. Even though I had friends, I was just often left out. And I did not want to be seen as this left out, not fitting in kid because it's embarrassing when we're this age. We take it as like a personal issue, like something's wrong with us. I didn't want anyone else to also point this out and laugh at me because that's often what happens, you know, when you don't have a ton of friends or people if you're constantly alone. Kids laugh at you. I felt so much immense shame, and I struggled to understand why socializing was hard for me. I was often told that kids are just mean, or don't worry, you'll make friends one day. And I did not recognize until later that this experience of only sometimes being included created more beliefs that I was just a backup plan. I also felt as if I had to be an imposter, wearing a suit of normalcy, because things like intuition, connecting to the earth, plants, animals, and spirits was not something I could freely talk about when I was young. If I were allowed to walk barefoot every day, I would without question. I had to ignore what made me me and try to fit into this conditioned reality of what was acceptable. And yet, doing so never worked for me either. So, even at this age, connecting with all of these things came so naturally to me. But I also felt as if I couldn't express it because most people didn't understand. And I remember my mom actually saying, like, outside of this house, it's not a good idea to talk about these things. And she was doing that to protect me. And because the consciousness state at that point, too, it just wouldn't have been very well received. But now, leaping forward to middle school and high school, I experienced the same things, but with different groups of friends. The characters and scenery changed, but the main story was still of me feeling isolated and left out. I felt fundamentally flawed, and I desperately searched for any answer outside of myself to fill that pain. If I found a place that accepted me, the pain of being too much or not enough would temporarily dissipate. So the next piece, the nightmare that became my reality. I was in ninth grade, and it seemed that the devil took over my life with a smile and a charm. I may have been through violation, pain, and betrayal before, but it was nothing to this extreme sense of danger. A teenage boy who I would call Adam knew girls in my grade. He was older than me. I did not think much of him showing up at our school during or after. So I, this lonely, isolated girl, caught his predator scent at lightning speed. Like a bear sniffing out its food source from many miles away, so was this situation. In the beginning, I thought many questions that he had asked me were harmless. He's asking questions to get to know me, I thought. He dated someone in my school that I knew, that I was friends with, and I figured if he were dangerous, he would have done something to her by now. So in my mind, I see him getting along with people, but it also didn't quite make sense to me why he's a teenager still in school, but at our school all the time. But at this age, red flags are not necessarily a built-in system when it came to complex relationships. So I was nice. I would be wrong if I did not admit in the beginning. It was nice to have someone seem interested in me in my life, to somewhat see me. And of course, my parents would ask, how's school? How's your friends? And I just never fully opened up to them about my struggles with keeping friends, feeling valued and feeling respected. I was pretty much a closed book when it came to other people, impenetrable, not wanting to cause them any grief, not wanting to burden them. I did not want to worry them. They had enough on their plate raising me and my brother, taking care of everything else. I seemed to take on a lot of responsibility for other people's emotions at such a young age, and I was scared that being honest would somehow get me in trouble. At this time, I confused interest with care. Many times I would go somewhere with a friend, somewhere in public, and this boy would be cruising by or walking by. So he would stop, we would talk, and I could feel that hesitation rising within me. But it was not until a few weeks or maybe a month of this that I started to realize I knew absolutely nothing about him. He was always showing up where I was, like at a friend's house or the basketball court, and I began to feel sick to my stomach when I saw him. I had been around predator types before, and although I did not consciously piece the puzzle together, my body knew and started giving me little warning signs that this could be a dangerous situation. It was not until he started calling my house and calling himself my boyfriend, even though I was too scared to correct him and say no, but I did not know why. And at this point, I did not know that feeling coerced into something is not consent. I was coerced by a lot of people to be around him. Like some of the people that I knew would always try and put us in the same place together once he was no longer dating the other person. And yeah, so there was more coercion and not consent with this. And I just went along with things for a while because I didn't know any different. I didn't know how to stand up for myself at this point. So I was finally, after quite a while, able to say that we're not dating. I am not his girlfriend. And with those words, the illusion of charm turned into the shackles of ownership and property. He created this illusion to everyone that I was his and that something sexual was going on between us, which it was not. And even if it had, it does not warrant this sort of behavior. But it quickly turned into rumors about how promiscuous I was at the time, and it spread like wildfire around the school. It did not matter how many times I said that this was not true. The culture of victim shaming and blaming was at an all-time high. I quickly took notice of the long stares down the hallway, the turning of the cheek to whisper to another, the judgments that were projected thick onto my skin like tar. Every day, I felt more and more of my soul leave my body as I struggled to keep my tears from pouring down my cheeks. Then the phone calls to my home began again. It was either him or some other friend of his that he had enlisted to call to say the most egregious things that no parent or person should ever have to hear about themselves or a loved one. He continued to show up at my school, and our interactions escalated into verbal abuse, sexual accusations, sexual connotations on what would be done to me, despite the many attempts from the principal and police to kick him off school property. He would leave, but would just hang out off the school property and continue to shout at me as I left to walk home. There came a boiling point for my parents and for myself that it was apparent that the only option was to fully sit down and consult with the police. I had started losing any sense of self, any sense of possible happiness. I had turned into a dark hole, a swirling blackness that I could not escape. The destruction of the patriarchy and the lack of support. During the ride to the police station, a huge part of me was somewhat relieved to be receiving help. I anticipated that I would be welcome there, that I'd be met with compassion and understanding. But as I sat in the cold metallic colored interrogation room, I began to realize this was not a safe place either. The officers that took my statements seemed dumbfounded, confused, and even asked me accusatory questions like, what sexual acts have you performed on this boy? Usually, no one is obsessed with another for no reason. You must have done something for him to not leave you alone. My mom, notably, was enraged by these statements. I professed what I perceived as innocence. The fact that I have to say that this is what makes me innocent is still outrageous to me. Regardless of how you have interacted with another person, I will always say this: it does not give them the right of ownership to you, your body, or their incredibly dangerous actions beyond that. But the whole statement of my innocence seemed to be dismissed by the looks of the apathetic officers. They had essentially said that I was just a jealous ex-girlfriend trying to get back at him. And I felt numb, listening to my mother angrily demanding they help me. It felt as if time stopped and my body went cold. It felt as if I had died inside that day. I understand what other innocent victims must feel like, explaining and defending themselves over a crime committed against them, being gaslit and treated like a jealous and promiscuous ex-girlfriend instead of being treated like a victim of a crime. Even to this day, I asked my parents so many times, you remember them saying this, right? This isn't in my head, right? This is what happens when we are gaslit. The entire experience left me traumatized and never wanting to open to another person emotionally. And this went on for years. I lost all trust in people in positions of authority and anyone that is supposed to be there to help. This abuse extended to the point where he also convinced 6 other girls that I was trying to destroy his life and everything that I said was false. They were going to jump and attack me and beat me up on his behalf. Luckily, I was able to get through to these girls somehow. Something in there somewhere must have triggered them to know that this was not the actions of a manipulative girl seeking destruction. These were the actions of a girl trying to get her right to safety taken seriously. When I was about 15, there was a big incident, and it's one that replays in my mind over and over. I was walking home after school with my brother, who was trailing behind me. He was about, I don't know, like 30, 40 feet behind me. You couldn't really see him, just the way that the trail curved and the way that the trees were. You couldn't really see him. But it was a normal day. The weather was temperate, and I was focused on the ground ahead of me as I usually did. I was always looking down, just thinking of the day, my melancholy, sad self walking home. The homework, the assignments, everything that needed to be done, because I always made sure that everything was done and that I was an overachiever at this time as well. But then I heard rustling in the bushes off to my left. The dirt trail had grass off to the side, tall trees, lots of greenery, many easy places to hide. And then 3 boys appeared into view, my stalker and 2 of his friends. He was smirking at me, and he had told his friends to grab me. In this moment, I froze in fear as I was taking in what was happening. My breathing felt like it almost stopped, until I heard a yell pierce the thick air around me. My brother was running up behind me, shouting, "Run home now." His voice freed me from my paralyzed state, and I bolted around them, and I ran like I would not live to see another day. All I could think of in those 5 minutes of sprinting home with every ounce of adrenaline in my system was, are they going to kill my brother? Are they going to hurt him? Are they following me? All I did know was that I did not look back. I kept my head forward, my legs moving, and I focused solely on just getting home. The moment I arrived, I fumbled my keys, I unlocked the door, I slammed it shut behind me and locked it. I called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived at the trail, the boys were all gone. And when my brother made it home, I was finally able to breathe. Every worst possible scenario up until this point was running through my head. What are they capable of? I never underestimate anybody and their promise to hurt another. He was okay. He was not hurt in any way. And thankfully, they did not touch him. I was so grateful for him for being there, for stunning them as they thought I was alone. That's probably the only reason why I was able to run around them and get home, because he scared them. It has replayed in my mind so many times. What would have happened had I not had my brother there, that extra protection that day? Unfortunately, I was met with more dismissal from the police. They said to me, in front of my parents no less, until you wind up dead in a ditch one day, there's absolutely nothing we can do. That short, empty, charged sentence has reverberated through my mind regularly since that day. There seemed to be a sense of finality that rippled through. Would I have a chance at a normal life? Or is it my destiny for my life to be cut short at the hands of this boy who is now an adult man? Would I ever live to see another day? Or would he keep progressing and actually finally kidnap me and then take my life, as he promised to do many times? Soon after, I had my license, my full license, and I was able to work after school most days and on the weekends. This job felt like a reprieve for me, a way to feel some freedom along with my car and not to be as worried to go to places. Unfortunately, that reprieve did not last long. He found out where I worked and he began showing up there. Things just kept escalating more and more. He was threatening my life constantly at this point. He would stand tall, look over the counter at me working as I helped customers in the drive-thru and say, "Don't you worry. I have a bullet with your name on it when you least expect it." I felt powerless. I felt alone. I felt that there was no way out. And I began making up fantasies around not wanting to be alive anymore. I was tired of looking over my shoulder. I was tired of feeling afraid, terrified, and threatened. Sorry, guys, this is still an emotional thing for me. I've done so much work around this, and I actually saw him for the first time in person in my town probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I felt nothing. But of course, this grief is a way for me to process, to deactivate emotional charges, as it is for you dealing with past experiences that you've had. Grief is healthy. It's a wave. It helps us process on deeper levels, regardless of how much healing we do. Going deeper sometimes and revisiting, through an experience like this can be very helpful. So the crumbling of who you've been in order to become who you are meant to be. One day, I literally heard my soul say to me, "Do not give up. You have a purpose here. Safety is important, and this is not okay. And you need to force someone to listen." This voice was coming through a sense of rage that had begun to boil over the years. This sacred rage I started to feel. It began to propel me to make waves and not to take answers I had received as gospel any longer. I kept visiting the police department and kept a log of events. I kept making statements. Although I took that anger and utilized it for deep change, it wasn't until almost 7 years into this experience that he was convicted of any crimes. After 2 earth angels came forward. And these earth angels, one was the front desk, who had saw me for years come in and literally got so upset that no one had helped me. He found a female police officer who actually took me seriously, who took me in, sat down, made sure I was okay, followed me home after making the statement, called me to make sure I made it into my house. And up until that point, no one had done that. Absolutely nobody. So to me, they were angels on earth in the positions they needed to be, making real change. I was able to finally get a 1-year restraining order, against him. And I knew that I needed to take back my power. I just had felt powerless and hopeless for so much of my life, between car accidents, deaths, and this stalker who had been ongoing. But I had no idea how to change things. It was not until one fateful afternoon that my power would slingshot back to me, and my energy would pour out like a waterfall, protecting me in a way I had never seen before. I had to switch locations 3 times in my job because of this mess. And one afternoon, after doing some spiritual seeking, I had begun doing some healing work at this point. I had started taking energy healing classes. So one afternoon at this new location, he came waltzing in with the same old revolting grin and smirk that I had seen so many times before. My normal reaction anytime he came in was to flee, to run to the back in tears, to call the police, to shake with fear. And once the ordeal was over, expel the contents from my stomach for the next hour or day. But this time, I decided no more. I was so tired of running. I was tired of being scared. I was tired of feeling like any second my world would end or come crashing down. So I stayed. I was at a soul level tired, but the anger that I had spoke to was just so deep. My feminine rage was coming to the surface now. Suddenly, I could feel a rush through my body that I can only describe as a whirlwind of love, but also that anger that I had never felt before. Love for myself, recognition of my power, me stepping forward and choosing to trust myself. Finally, I made deliberate eye contact. And in my head, I repeated, "You have no control over me. You are no longer allowed to talk to me, to touch me, to be anywhere near me. I rescind any permission I may have given on any level to you." It felt like eternity in that void, standing in the bright flame of my power, feeling it swirl around me and project forward, watching him stop dead in his tracks. The color from his face fell to the floor. His smirk was gone, and I continued that eye contact and continued the statement in my head. Seconds later, he turned and quickly walked out the door, not a word uttered to me, never to return. After he fully left the premises, that swirling energy dissipated, and I returned to this real-time reality, breathing slow and steady, in awe of just what occurred here. He could have had a gun this time. He could have stayed the course with a barrage of threats, but something had changed. I changed. I was no longer engaging in his victim triangle. I stepped out and I acknowledged how powerful I truly was. How love and boundaries right now were my personal answer. I have tested standing in my power, revoking permission, stating my boundaries energetically in other situations since, all with similar effects. And I'm going to say I have been somehow managed and swindled into cults. I'm just going to say it blankly, cults. Didn't know they were, but this is where I've also used these permission statements. So they had no permission to do any energy work or do anything at all in these ritual situations. So I've had an interesting life. But the upward cycle of rebirth and creating the life you were truly meant for. Shortly after this occurrence, I felt as if I got a second lease on life. I actually quit my job and I decided to pursue being in the healing industry. I had finished my certification almost 2 years prior, and I was taking advanced courses now. It was time for the biggest leap of faith of my life. I quickly found a job at a holistic clinic in a new city, where I was a practitioner in a different province, 12 hours away. I eagerly said goodbye to my old life and embarked on a new adventure. I also began truly healing my nervous system and other aspects of myself that I was denying for so long. I met many of my now really good and best long-term friends. Everything began falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle. For the first time, I had felt as if there was meaning in my life beyond just surviving another day. Looking over my shoulder became less and less, although still today, I am working on my triggers and flashbacks. I am no longer looking for his face everywhere I look. I'm no longer contracted in my body, wondering if this is the last day that I live. I finally feel free from those invisible shackles that held me down for so long. I created a full-time energy medicine practice in Calgary, where I stayed for a few years until feeling safe enough to move forward and have a family. Although life has its ups and downs since then, like moving back to BC, getting married and then separating, while also creating an international online business, traveling to and from Alberta to facilitate classes as well. I feel aligned and powerful to handle what life has coming my way. I have embraced my inner light while also working through the depths of my shadow. As I finish writing this, I pause to look over to see my 5-year-old daughter sleeping peacefully beside me after a fun-filled day of swimming at the lake, playing in the sun, surrounded by loving friends. Grateful tears run down my cheek like a river. I could not have imagined this would be my life one day. I now run my own successful business with international client base, with many classes, events, programs, helping other beings reclaim who they are and work through their survival responses and heal their nervous system so that they can work deeply with their intuition. This is my biggest passion, guiding others from powerless to unstoppable, from helpless to hopeful, from lost to divine clarity. If this feels activating to you and a divine message, I invite you to explore the many options that I have to offer. From this deep, dark void to the brightest love of light and acceptance, this is what I wish for you all. I am so glad that I did not give up on life because I could not have imagined the love that surrounds me now. Never give up on you. Shine the light within and allow yourself to reclaim who you truly were meant to be on this earth. We need you too. Thank you for sharing in this with me, this journey of going from just such a dark place into who you see today. I was such a cynical, horrible person too for so long, until 10 years ago or 11 years ago when I started healing and doing this work. So I just want to ripple out there that this is possible, regardless of who you've been or what your adversities have been up until this point, what trauma you've been through. Having a life of your creation can be possible. And it's really about getting to know who you are on that soul level. So I ask you, what part of your inner child in your experience still feels powerless and hopeless? And can you invite that inner child in and let them know that they are not hopeless? There's nothing wrong with them. And give them this big, loving hug. Ask them what it is your inner child needs in order to heal and move forward and to reconnect with the adult version of you now. You'd be surprised how simple it is, what our inner child needs, what these versions of us needed at that time, that we can now give to that version of us and move forward with so much love and clarity. And also knowing that healing, there isn't a destination with this. It could be a lifelong getting to know who we are, because it will constantly evolve and it will change. And there's nothing wrong with that. We are divine beings, and I see you and uphold you as such. Thank you so much for joining me today. And put any revelations, anything that has popped up for you, any clarity that you would love to share, please post them in the comments. I would love to read them. Thank you again so much.